and welcome to Firstpost Live, where we bring you the day's top 4 stories from across the world. I am Grishin Galan, live from the Firstpost studios. Let's begin with the headlines. Prime Minister Narendra Modi will travel to Johannesburg from November 21 to 23 for the G20 Leaders Summit, where he is expected to lay out India's priorities across all sessions and hold several bilateral meetings on the sidelines. US President Donald Trump signs a bill ordering the Justice Department to release its files on Jeffrey Epstein within 30 days after the legislation sailed through both chambers of Congress with overwhelming bipartisan support. Taiwan President Lai Ching-te signaled support for Tokyo by eating Japanese-sourced sushi, a symbolic move after China warned it would ban all Japanese seafood imports amid rising tensions over Taiwan. Bangladesh police unveils new uniforms in a bid to rebuild public trust ahead of the country's first elections since last year's mass uprising which toppled former Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina's government and left the force battling a crisis of credibility. And hundreds of Indonesians take temporary shelters after Mount Semeru erupted in eastern Java, sending ash and gas 13 kilometers into the sky and forcing authorities to evacuate nearly 900 people and raise the alert to its highest level. Today we begin with a company that has been at the center of both excitement and anxiety in the tech world. For months, there have been growing fears that the artificial intelligence boom might be heading towards a bubble. And at the heart of the debate is NVIDIA, the world's most valuable publicly listed company and the main supplier of chips that powers AI. Yesterday night, NVIDIA released its latest quarterly results, and the numbers were far stronger than anyone had predicted. For many investors, this was this moment of truth, a test of whether the AI industry was truly slowing down. NVIDIA reported its highest ever revenue at $57 billion. That's 62% higher than the same period last year. A part of this came from its data centers business, which includes chips used for training and running AI models. That division alone made $51.2 billion, up sharply both quarter on quarter and year on year. The results brought relief to investors worried that the current tech boom might suddenly slow down. In fact, it also helped steady the stock market. Asian markets rallied today with tech firms such as Samsung, SK Hynix and TSMC leading the gains. Among broader markets, Japan's Nikkei briefly jumped more than 4% and South Korea's Kospi too opened in green. Indian benchmark indices also steadied during earlier trading. NVIDIA's results mattered because they arrived at a time when nervousness was growing. Investors had been asking whether companies were spending too much money building giant data centers. And some major names even raised alarms, including Alphabet CEO Sundar Pichai, former Amazon CEO Jeff Bezos, and former Intel CEO Pat Gelsinger. Meanwhile, NVIDIA's own stock had been under pressure. Shares were down almost 8% in November, especially after large investors like Pete Thiel's fund and Japan's SoftBank sold off their holdings. And that added fuel to the bubble narrative. But on the earnings call yesterday, CEO Jensen Huang pushed back.
There's been a lot of talk about an AI bubble. From our vantage point, we see something very different. As a reminder, NVIDIA is unlike any other accelerator. We excel at every phase of AI, from pre-training to post-training to inference.
The NVIDIA CEO offered a simple 3-part explanation. First, he said many everyday systems, from search engines to ad recommendations to engineering tools, now need AI to work properly. That means older computer systems will gradually be replaced with ones built around NVIDIA's chips. Second, he argued that AI will not only improve existing applications but also bring entirely new ones that don't exist yet. And third, he pointed to what he called agentic AI systems that can act, plan, and make decisions with very little human input. NVIDIA's importance is clear in another way too. Every major cloud provider, Amazon, Microsoft, Google, and Oracle, relies on the company. So NVIDIA CEO has a front row seat to how fast the industry is changing. NVIDIA's performance suggests the momentum isn't fading yet, but As with every major technological shift, the real test will be how these bold promises unfold over the next few years. We now turn to West Asia, where Israel launched airstrikes in South Lebanon, the latest in a series of near-daily attacks across the border region. Israel says the strikes are aimed at preventing Hezbollah from rebuilding its military capabilities, whilst Hezbollah insists it has followed all requirements under the US-backed ceasefire signed last November. The Israeli military claims it issued warnings online before launching the strikes, identifying specific buildings it said it intended to target in 4 southern villages. Residents were seen fleeing before strikes hit multiple locations, sending thick smoke into the sky. The Israeli army said it was striking weapons storage facilities linked to Hezbollah's rocket unit, adding that the targets were quote-unquote in the heart of the civilian population. Then early on Wednesday, Lebanon's health ministry reported that a separate Israeli strike in the southern village of Al-Tiri left 1 person dead and at least 11 others injured. Israel said the target was a Hezbollah member, allegedly working to quote-unquote re-establish readiness in the area. The Israeli Defense Forces also said it identified a Hezbollah headquarters and weapons depot at multiple locations. A Hezbollah official, however, dismissed the allegations, calling them false and designed to justify continued strikes. On Tuesday, at least 13 people were killed in a refugee camp near the coastal city of Sidon. Israel says it hit a Hamas compound responsible for attacks. However, Hamas denies having any military presence in the camp. Reports also suggest Tuesday's escalation was one of the deadliest strikes in Lebanon since last year's war. Since the war in Gaza started, Israel has launched strikes in Lebanon against the Iran-backed Hezbollah group and a range of armed organizations. Now, the United States has recently increased pressure on Lebanon to curb Hezbollah's influence. Washington even cancelled a planned visit by Lebanese army commander after expressing displeasure with a Lebanese military statement that accused Israel of disrupting stability in the region. In a sign of wider regional tensions, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu travelled to a military site inside an occupied territory belonging to Syria on Wednesday. He said the mission carried both defensive and offensive importance, warning that conditions could shift at any time.
We attribute immense importance to our capability, both defensive and offensive here, protecting our Druze allies and mainly protecting the state of Israel and its northern border facing the Golan. This is a mission that can develop at any moment. But we trust you. And I very, very much appreciate not only what you are doing, but also the fact that your families are mobilized for this. I want to pass along thanks not only from the government of Israel, but also from the citizens of Israel and from the state of Israel. Thank you very much.
Netanyahu's visit came as US President Donald Trump said Washington was working closely with Israel on efforts to redefine ties with Syria following his meeting with Syrian President Al-Sharaa at the White House earlier this month. The conflict that broke out in October 2023 after Hamas attacked Israel has spilled over, with Israel attacking Iran-backed proxies in multiple regions. Lebanon maintains that Israel has breached the agreement by continuing to occupy positions in the south, but as tensions along the border continue to rise. Moving to our next story. A South Korean ferry carrying over 200 people ran aground on rocks off the country's southwest coast on Wednesday. The grounding has revived memories of the deadly 2014 Seawall ferry disaster. The ferry is named Queen Genoveva II and it weighs 26,000 tons. It has a capacity of over 1,000 passengers with multiple decks for vehicles. According to the Coast Guard, the ferry struck a rocky outcrop in shallow waters less than an area before its scheduled arrival. The impact left the vessel stuck in the water while making its route across the Yellow Sea. And at least 27 people sustained minor injuries from the impact. The ferry was traveling from Jeju Island to the port city of Mokpo. According to officials, it was last sailing at about 26 miles per hour before it hit the rocks. The Coast Guard said the ferry was on autopilot in the area, and by the time it approached the rock, it was 2 to 3 minutes late to avoid the collision. The chief investigator said the captain in his 60s and two officers in their 40s were charged with injury by gross negligence, a crime carrying up to 5 years in prison. Authorities said the ferry's operator and crew members were also under scrutiny, and investigators were examining cell phones, data recorders and security footage.
Regarding a passenger ship ran aground, we mobilized all available Coast Guard resources and, with cooperation from multiple agencies, we rescued all passengers. The rescued passengers are arriving at Mokpo Port and, after being examined by medical team, they will move to their accommodations. As for the cause of the accident, further investigation is required. However, at this time, we preliminarily assess it to be due to negligence by the captain or the navigating officer.
All 267 people on board have now been rescued, and about 20 vessels and a plane had to be mobilized for the mission, and the vessel has now returned to port. Passengers described the grounding as a near-death experience, saying the force of the impact caused panic before the rescue began.
When I heard the vessel had ran aground onto the island, I actually felt somewhat relieved, thinking at least we would not be thrown into the water. I thought I might die. The sound was too loud. It sounded like a big accident. But having seen the Sewol ferry, I knew that in situations like this, you have to stay calm, move outside, wear a life jacket, and wait. It seems like a lot of people did the same.
This incident revived memories of the 2014 Sewol ferry disaster that sent shockwaves in South Korea. More than 300 people died, with most of them being school students. The tragedy led to years of public outrage and major maritime safety reforms in the country. Investigators are now analyzing navigation data, crew actions and electronic recordings to determine how a routine journey from Jeju to Mokpo ended in a collision with rocks. With all passengers safe, the focus has shifted to accountability and whether safety lessons learned after the Sewol disaster were fully implemented. Moving on to our final story today. India's beloved tomato, the red heart of every curry, is suddenly wearing a crown far heavier than usual. Tomato prices have surged across India, leaving retail markets tense, households cautious, and traders looking anxiously at the skies. As supplies thin out due to excess October rainfall, government data shows retail prices rising anywhere between 25% to 100% across states within just a month. As per the Ministry of Consumer Affairs, the all-India average retail price of tomato climbed from 36 rupees per kilogram to 46 rupees per kg in last 1 month. But the spikes are sharper in certain pockets. Chandigarh tops the chart with a staggering 112% rise, while Andhra Pradesh, Himachal Pradesh and Karnataka all report increases above 40%. In wholesale markets, tomato prices in Maharashtra saw a 45% jump in November, while Delhi's distribution hubs recorded a 26% rise. In many cities, good quality tomatoes are reportedly touching 80 rupees a kilo, a number that feels almost festive in itself. And the festivities are partly to blame. With the marriage season underway and the New Year demand building up, traders expect prices to go up in the coming weeks. Notably, just a month ago, crashing prices of onions, potatoes and tomatoes had helped bring India's retail inflation down to 0.25%, the lowest since 2013. But nature flipped the script. Excessive rain swept through major vegetable-producing states, bruising delicate crops and slashing the number of trucks arriving at key distribution hubs, such as this one in New Delhi. Traders say the supplies from vegetable-producing states have halved in the last 1 week. And so the story unfolds like a familiar Indian drama. The plump and tender tomato suddenly becomes a luxury guest in our kitchens. Households begin rationing tomato use with precision of jewel keepers. But this moment of scarcity also revives memories of how quickly the wheel can turn. Just weeks ago, tomatoes were so cheap they struggled to find buyers. Retail inflation hit negative numbers for key vegetables. Tomatoes at minus 43%, onions at minus 54%. India's vegetable prices are famously volatile because the country still lacks the strong buffers that protect markets elsewhere. Unlike the US or Europe, which rely on global sourcing, cold storage networks and large-scale food processing, India depends primarily on seasonal domestic harvests with limited tomato processing capacity. As of 2023, just 1% of tomatoes are processed, compared to over 33% in the US. With no stabilizing cushion in between the tomato like the onion before it, swings dramatically from feast to famine, turning every monsoon and every dry spell into a national price event. That's all for today. Thank you for joining us. I am Gushin Gal and we'll